What I am going to discuss today is about different types of electrical diagrams and drawing. In electrical and electronics engineering, we use different types of drawing or diagrams to represent a certain electrical system or circuit. These electrical circuits are represented by lines to represent wires and symbols or icons to represent electrical and electronic components. It helps us better understanding the connection between different components. Electricians rely on electrical floor plan, which also in electrical diagram for doing any building wiring. Now, we are going to see what are the different kinds of electrical diagrams or drawings that we use. The first one is what we call the block diagram. So here's the example of block diagram. When we say block diagram, it's a type of electrical drawings that represents the principal components of a complex system in the form of blocks interconnected by lines that represent their relation. The block diagram is the simplest form of electrical drawing as it only highlights the function of its components and provides the flow of process in the system. Block diagrams are easier to design, and it is the first stage in designing a complex circuit for any project. It lacks information about the wiring and placement of individual components. It only represents the main components of the system and ignores any small components. This is why electricians do not rely on block diagrams. Here is our example. Is a block diagram shows of an FM transmitter. The next one is what we call the schematic circuit diagram. When we say schematic circuit diagram, it is an electrical circuit that shows the complete electrical connections between components using their symbols and lines. Unlike wiring diagram, it does not specify the real location of the components. The line between the components does not represent real distance between them. Schematic diagram helps us in showing the series and parallel connections between the components and the exact terminal connection between them. One can easily troubleshoot certain schematic by applying electronic circuit theory. It is the most common type of electrical drawing and are mostly used in implementing electrical circuit by technician. Most engineering students rely on schematic diagram while developing various electrical projects. Here in our example, it is a schematic diagram of a voltage amplifier. It uses various symbols to represent the electrical components and the lines to represent the electrical connection between their terminals. The practical circuit may vary in appearance, but the electrical connections and its functions will remain the same. Okay? The next one is what we call the single line diagram or one line diagram. Okay, as in our example, here it is a representation of electrical circuit using a single line. As the name suggests, a single line is used to denote the multi-power such as three-phase system. Single line diagram does not show the electrical connections of the components, but it may show the size and ratings of the components being used. It's simply a complex three-phase power circuit by showing all electrical components and their interconnection. Here in our example, this diagram clearly shows a three-phase power generating station that transmits the power to the consumers below. It passes through multiple stations whose functions and ratings are also mentioned, but their electrical connections are not highlighted. The next one is what we call wiring diagram. The wiring diagram is used for the representation of electrical components in their approximate physical location using their specific symbols and their interconnections using lines. Vertical and horizontal lines are used to represent wires, and each line represents a single wire that connects between electrical components. Wiring diagram shows a pictorial view of the components such that it resembles its electrical connection. Arrangement and position in real circuit, it really helps us showing the interconnection in different equipment such as electrical panel and distribution boxes and etc. They are mostly used for wiring installation in home and industry. Like in our example, we can see a three-phase wiring installation in a home. The next one is what we call the pictorial diagram. Okay, the pictorial diagram does not necessarily represent the actual circuit. In fact, it shows the visual appearance of the circuit in real time. It cannot be used to understand or troubleshoot the actual circuit, and for this reason alone, it is not commonly used. For some with less knowledge in electrical, it is impossible to understand how the circuit works and diagnose it. So as you can see, the pictorial diagram does not provide enough information regarding the electrical connection of the components. The next one is what we call the ladder diagram or line diagram. The ladder diagram are electrical diagrams that represent an electrical circuit in industries to document control logic system. It resembles a ladder, which is why it is named ladder diagram. So there are two vertical lines. The left vertical lines represent power rail or voltage sources, while the right vertical line represent the ground or neutral. Each horizontal row represents a parallel circuit rank. So a ladder diagram is simple, easier to understand, and it helps in troubleshooting the circuit quickly. The next one is what we call the logic diagram. Okay? So look, from the word itself, the logic diagram represents a logic circuit by showing complex circuit and process using various blocks or symbols. The logic functions are represented by their logic symbols, whereas the blocks are used to represent complex logic circuit. These blocks are labeled with their logic functions for better understanding without knowing the internal structure. The blocks are interconnected by lines which represent the input and output lines for the signal. Here in our example, this is a logic diagram of a single bit full adder made from digital logic gates. So its input lines A and B feeds a single bit to an adder, which C represent a carrying bit for previous adders. Okay, the output lines provide the sum and carry out in form of bits. Then the next one is what we call the riser diagram. The riser diagram is the illustration of physical layout of electrical distribution in multi-level building using a single line. So here in our example, okay, so it is a drawing of what we call a riser diagram. It shows a size of conduits, wire size, circuit breaker rating, and other electrical devices from the point of entry up to the small circuit branches of each level. It shares the layout with alarm system as well as telecom and internet cable. The next one is what we call electrical floor plan. When we say electrical floor plan, it is a vertical representation of various appliances such as light, switch, and fans, etc. in the building. So it specifies their exact location with their size and distance from each wall and ceiling. It shows a scaled version of each room from above. It usually contains legend that provides a visual explanation of the symbols used in it. Here, an individual floor plan is designed for each floor in a multi-level building, and it is used by electrical for wiring in a newly constructed building or during the rewiring of building. It helps in locating the cables layout inside the walls. And the last one is what we call the IC layout diagram. When we say IC layout diagram, it is the IC layout diagram or IC mass layout refers to internal design of a semiconductor component. It is made up of multiple layers or mass of metal, oxide, and semiconductor materials to form an integrated circuit or IC. It represents the geometry as well as the size of different semiconductor layer and their connection. It describes the internal structure and are used in manufacturing and designing integrated circuit. Usually, as a computer technician, so we use or we need this IC layout diagram in what we call in troubleshooting other board. It can be in a motherboard of a cell phone, a motherboard of a laptop, or a motherboard of a computer. So that's all for today. Those are the examples of different electrical diagram.